came here because we met people from Siemens at a conference, called an ISET conference, a while ago. We heard about what they were doing here, and then we came back in December to study what Siemens was doing with the active student participation. And so, yes, Siemens is well now known outside Siemens at least. So good luck with getting known inside. I think it's happening in.
But you cannot be disciplined in your own country. That's a big issue, and we experience the same.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're from Denmark. I'm from. At this moment, I'm both Aalborg University and University College of Northern Jutland, because I'm both a teacher and an educational developer, and then I'm also at this moment in time doing a PhD in co-creation in public sector innovation. So I'm a both and person at the moment.
Yeah. And I'm Annie, and this is Lone, and we come from Aalborg University. We're associate professors there. We do research. We also do staff development. Aalborg University.
And we teach students. We
and
try.
Of course teach. I mean, ordinary teachers. And what you should know about Aalborg University is that it's a problem-based learning university. And this means that approximately 50% of what the students are doing is problem-based projects in groups where they work independently with a supervisor, but they find and define their own problems, right, what they're working on. Of course, within an overall theme, but still they have to define the problems themselves and work on them. And we do this at all levels, from bachelor up to master level, in all study programs, in all 4 faculties. So it's completely general.
And what is important to mention that there the teacher would be a facilitator. When you talked about the prior discussion where the students do not, they can feel when the teacher in our university, students they work a lot by themselves, and then we act as facilitators who try to push them and ask questions and drive and push them. I cannot say that then we are not learner-led, but we facilitate them so that they solve the problems themselves by help from us.
Yeah. And our shared, what originally we came together with the shared interest in what we have called learner-led approaches in higher education or in education, and that is actually the learner-led approaches in our perspective actually tries to marry the expectation of the teacher with the wishes of the students. So we do not, in our approach, we do not sign ourselves out. We actually choose another approach working. So I think maybe we should go to that first, because last night we sat very late trying to discuss what would actually be relevant for you to hear in this context, and it's always a question of. So I think we should start with what made sense for us originally and maybe we don't have to argue for that in this context, because you might all agree, but for us it was quite a revelation when we came to think that, well, hey, working in this way, in the classic way of teaching in university colleges and university is that the student has to find his or her way into the course and making it make sense. And something that has come increasingly clear to us in teaching and learning is that it's all about making sense. And then we discussed onwards, and that's how we didn't sign ourselves out of the equation as teachers, because what we want to do with working in learner-led approaches is actually co-creating the curriculum or the course or whatever you call it, coming together, co-creating, and then the course is born out of that co-creation process. And we call it in a shared negotiation of meaning, because we think that's very important. That's where we find out, well, what are actually our conceptualizations and perceptions of whatever course field we're working with. So that's the picture of what we want to work with or develop.
And perhaps in this context, we should also say that when we said that in Aalborg University, the students work problem-oriented for 50% of the time, then of course there are the other 50%, right? And that's coursework and workshops and other kinds of activities and traditional lectures and so on. And our interest now is how can we sort of make this happen in that 50% of the time.
Yeah. And you will notice here that we also have we have the student, we have the teacher, but we also have a second or a third stakeholder that we call it other stakeholders, because we work with inviting external stakeholders into this co-creation process of the course content, because we actually want to bridge the gap between the external world and the educational institutions, and one of our ways of doing that is inviting external stakeholders into actually designing the course content, because what is relevant to work with, well, we don't know until we ask them. I can imagine what would be relevant for the students that I'm educating when they come out, when they are finished, but only the people who they are going to work with actually know what is actual at the moment. So that is, we introduce the other stakeholders also as a part of the co-creation process.
And here we can add that the students at the university actually work with projects, often very closely collaborating with organizations, firms outside university. So they get this real world connection in their study time. So it's another way of doing it.
And then we discussed, we have a lot of discussion about how do we actually promote this within our institution, our educational institutions, because that's also about what CEMUS is doing, how to spread that within the university. We have the same problems where we come from. And for the moment, in my sector, we're discussing different ways of working. We call it study activity model. And we have these different categories that we are starting to look into: participation of students and teachers initiated by teacher, participation of students initiated by teacher, participation of students initiated by students, participation of students and teachers initiated by students. We have these different categories, but what we came to see was that actually we miss out a quadrant, and that's maybe even a little paradoxical, but we came across the term the fifth quadrant. And that is students, teachers and other stakeholders co-creating the content and form, because it seems to us that you can only imagine either the students designing and leading, or the teachers leading and designing. But bringing them together, we can develop shared meaning. Yeah.
And it means that the teacher has to be very much aware of the role, he or her role and the student role. Because if you really go into this co-creation process, you have to shift your understanding of your own role. Just recently there was some research in Denmark that said when teachers supervise students group, 70% of the time is spent by the male teacher talking. So you can see that you really have to change your opinion on what are your role if you really want to have these processes going on among the students. So we have to be very much aware of what we have to change, and really, and that's the reason why I asked before, how is it? Because it is really, really difficult, because we have so many conventions, traditions, understanding in our body, so we have to leave them and change the role. And it is a challenge, I find. And we also have, as a teacher, to look at a student in another perspective. Seeing that students are, and we also have experience that students are actually very good, if they are allowed to, they can do wonderful things. We have experienced that, and we have to change this mindset. And the authority, we have tried to be more equal, yes, and that's true. We do not always have to be together as students. We have to leave a room or be aware and believe that students can do things. And it also means that students have to change their approaches to learning. They really have to be prepared to go into this co-creation process and being aware that they can do things like that. So it's challenging for both partners in this interplay. Yeah.
And actually also very, it's important to point out that this is what we've written here, that the teacher also becomes a co-learner. Yeah. Because we also operate with the, how can we, forestilling.
Imagination.
Nej, hvad hedder det? Concept of actually the teacher getting wiser as well in the interaction with the students. And when we have experienced that, when we actually co-create course content and when we enter these reflexive dialogues with the students, we too become actually very wiser on the field of shared investigation. So that is what we also want to. Yes, we are authorities because we have some knowledge within a field, and also that we would like to contribute to the students with. Why put our knowledge into a drawer and say, well, I won't give you that. But the meeting between students and teachers actually is a shared learning space. I think that's a very important point to make. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we can say that. I mean, summing up in that respect, that the way we see what we call learner-led approaches, it is a way of ensuring the student a position in the center of the learning process. And we really talked about how to phrase this in order not to say putting the student in the center or something like that. Really, that it's a much more sort of organic process. So that's really the aim, the goal of working in this way.
Yeah. But we're still in the starting point of experimenting with this. So we would love to have a dialogue with all of you in this room, because we are learning at the point of learning, and point of making our experiences, and also because we are also really interested, as it is between us, it is a shared research area, because we have our different practices. So we would very much like to have a dialogue with all of you. What are the thoughts? What are you developing here in CMS, and what are you developing other places?
And we are also trying to put it into. We have been looking through the existing theoretical material about student direction, student participation. So we're trying to make a theoretical approach to this, also to explain.
Like this morning's lecture, we will approaching it in that way.
Yeah.
And then a practical, because we have done different, tried this in different ways. This is one case where we experiment with doing with 100% learner-led approaches. It's in professional bachelor education, 4th semester. Culture studies is the overall frame, and this is how we went to it. This is the progression in the. Sorry for my.
English.
Yeah, the English. Yeah, that's a shared problem. The only working with this, that's also about the teacher being the authority, because we had this discussion last night. Well, it starts at some point. It must start with the teacher taking the decision that this is supposed to be learner-led, and in that step we are in the role as the authority. So who decides? Because it's very interesting. If I actually, I'll come back to that later. Because when I did this experiment, it turned out that quite a surprising part of the students wanted to have old-fashioned lectures. And that's the interesting thing about co-creating and co-designing course content, is that I thought, well, let's be all creative, let's be all workshop and performance and whatever. And quite a significant part of it was, no, we want lectures, and we want you to give lectures about that. And they came up with 3 different topics, and we want this person we've heard of, we want him to come in and give us a lecture about that, a classical lecture. So it's quite interesting. I think that's one of the interesting things about co-designing a course content, is that you actually get a huge variety of learning styles represented when you design, when you're open to it. This started with me taking the decision, this is going to be learner-led, and then I introduced the principle of learner-led education. And then we made an introduction, the framing, what was the overall frame, because we always have formal goals in education, so we can't just step outside the legislation and say, well, we don't have any law, educational law. We do have. So I introduced the frames to the students. I said, this is what the learning goals are. And then the co-creation started, because in what way do we, for instance, conceptualize the term culture? So I started with reaching into the preconceptualizations of the terms that we were supposed to work with. And then we started asking questions together. If this is the overall term, what questions come to you? What would be interesting looking into when we say culture, intercultural meeting, for instance? And then the students started formulating the questions they would like to work with. And then we discussed, well, if we're going to answer these questions, how can we do that didactically? What methods are we going to use? And all different sorts of methods came from the students, and some of them said, well, I would like to do a lecture myself, and I would like you to do a lecture, and we will walk on the streets of Aalborg and make some. So all kinds of methods came up, and in that method, we had a method bank, we called it. We gathered all the methods, and then those were the methods that we use in the course, and different, very. If any of you are interested in the specific methods and how we did it, you can please write me a mail. But then we started the shared exploration of the terms, and that was reflexive dialogue. Made design, and the students worked in groups or individually, answering the questions they had posed, and all sorts of documentations came up in their work. So it wasn't me asking them to make a 6 pages or 20 pages report or anything. How they would document their work was also a part of the co-creation process. And a lot of things went well, but I also had, I think one of the cons with working, a lot of pros, because I think I noted that the analytical and theoretical level of the students became much higher, and also their level of didactic understanding became higher. But there was some students who did not, how can you say, they didn't log into this. It didn't appeal to them working in this way. So their project work were only, it kind of developed somewhere where I just couldn't, I couldn't haul them back in. I had to, when I let go of my leadership in the classical way, I have to let the students follow their inspirations. And this project simply ended up somewhere where it wasn't at all relevant to the theoretical framework and the overall framework. It was not simply not relevant, and that, I think that's one of the
challenges.
Yeah, definitely one of the challenges, because could I just I didn't perform my authority or my power to say you can't work with that. I let them work with it, and yeah.
But then we can say, when we supervise our groups, we try to ask questions to find out if they are going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
So, but then we are an authority again, certainly.
Yeah.
So you cannot.
Yes, but we still leave it up to them to decide
Yes.
which way they'll go. I mean, we can only through dialogue and discussion and so on, and point towards interesting things to work with.
Yeah.
But still, it's up to them to decide and take responsibility for the decision.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah.
Hvor lang tid er det gået? Yeah. Alexis, you're the time. How much time do you have?
Yes, 10 minutes left approximately.
Okay.
And that's for questions.
Yeah, we would like to have some questions.
Yeah. Okay. Because I think the discussion would be actually more interesting.
Yeah.
But that's about LearnerLed. We know what we know what we know, but we would like to know what you know as well. And actually, when we were at CIMAS this December, we talked about how can we get a dialogue going on this topic. How can we keep in touch? And then we went back to our respective work lives. And not very much happened, unfortunately. That's the con of networking that we. However, we decided to make a blog about what we call LearnerLed approaches. And in that blog, and I can't get on the net, unfortunately, but in that blog there are, I think, 10 or 15 questions that we formulated together in December here at CIMAS that would be relevant discussing when we talk about LearnerLed approaches or active student participation or whatever we choose to call it. And I think that those questions are actually,
Valid.
yeah. But Alexis, could we go? Is it possible for us on this computer to go on the internet here?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Can we get? Yeah.
We can also use my computer, perhaps.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, great idea. Yeah.
We can.
Yeah, I'm not sure we can.
Should not go back.
I think
Or you
we
I
just-
can log.
we can
Or I
just-
can just log on.
Oh yeah, with your.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point. The same way I said that it creates a sense of insecurity with the student, but it does also with the teacher, because you have no idea where this will go, and probably it will go way beyond you. So you are seriously co-learner, and I like that. But I think the reason why you find that uncomfortable is because you have a traditional view of knowledge that you just can't let go.
I like what Sharon said this morning about the shared responsibility of the possible failure.
Yeah.
Because we all love it when it's a success. We love it when our students and ourselves as teachers come out much better than we were before we started, and we can all have our arms up. But this is taking a risk, and this is really taking a risk because we will have colleagues looking at us and saying that you will never. This is too creative, too far out, and how about this and this and this? So we'll have a lot of people looking at us and saying, well, I don't think so. So there's a lot of stake working like this, and it of course, because I think rarely teachers lack the need for control. We have this, we want to control the situation. When we step back and stop controlling the situation, we take a huge risk because we have a responsibility.
Yeah, you're on the blog.
Yeah.
Also, I found it interesting, you had in your presentation, you didn't mention it now, I think, but you have this sort of arrow that goes from the top left corner to the bottom right,
Yeah.
which I think is about the students' role, how the shifts between the power between students and teacher in this. So, what do you think is the most important things to say to a student in the beginning, just to make them feel secure in this situation, and how do you, this whole learning, leading, letting go, control process, how do you manage that?
Oh, extremely good question, because we have. I think that's also one of the. I think that could be pointing to one of the cons, because actually it takes a lot of time to have this running dialogue about the process. That to ensure that we are not running completely wild, and to ensure the safety and the comfort of the both teacher and students when we let go of the control. So I think that could be pointing to one of the cons, because it actually takes some resources and some time to have that running dialogue. So that's why we need to develop methods to have that. And what was the question? Did I?
What's the best way to introduce students? As we compare it
Yeah.
to this course and just the student expectations when they enter, and I say that master students might be the hardest ones because they are very good at being traditional students, perhaps because they've been done for a long time, and they're very good at expectations and fulfilling expectations.
Yeah.
So how do you approach students in the beginning?
I think that's about it. You also said something about what was you made a very good building academic skills. One of your points in your presentation. It was about that. And I think how you introduce the students to this is actually having how do you call that, ligeværdig, equal dialogue. You establish an equal relation that you establish a meta dialogue where you actually where part of the dialogue you have with the students is also discussing the didactics and the methods. So you establish the shared space. We're in this together, and this is an experiment. We are going to work with this. So monitoring the development on the way. Are we getting where we want to get? the shared responsibility again. I think you have to have a meta dialogue with the students
Yeah.
about that meta communication.
Yeah.
That's at least how I do it. And the students expressed great, as they really liked being talked to as equals. They really liked being invited into the didactic machine room in a way, because they came kom bagom, ikke også? Det der med at komme bagom, hvordan tingene foregår.
Behind the scenes?
Yeah, behind the scenes of the planning, because that is building academic skills as well.
And it's actually about co-creating curricula as well.
Yes.
So being a part of the whole process. But it's quite strange for students in our country. It is to be so much part, and we have lots of colleagues who cannot understand that it will be possible because students cannot be very constructive in this. But it's not our experiences. They are very, very good. If you invite them, they can do it. So. But we can say, compared to this, that you have this special course where you do something very different from your colleagues. When students start at our university, we have to convince them that this is a good model. Many of them they have moved from Copenhagen or other parts of the country into our part of the country, which is very north. And we have also very local who just joined this university and they are not aware of which kind of university it is. So we have to spend a lot of time at the beginning to teach them how to be active partners in their own learning processes. Teach them how to use this model optimally, and we actually have to do it all through the whole study programs. But especially in the beginning, we spend lots of time of teaching them doing this, because it is a break from what they were used to when they came from upper secondary schools, where it's much lecture oriented, and then suddenly in the university they have to be students, and they have to take on themselves a big responsibility. So it's very important that they understand why this meta communication all the time. Why are we doing this? And also perceive it.
An interesting point actually is when we have master students in part-time studies, practitioners who go back to university, and they of course come from all kinds of educational backgrounds, and they actually find it quite easy to adapt to the problem-oriented way of working, because they come from a practice, and they're used to working problem-oriented, so they're less. They need less convincing, I think. Yeah.
Jeg tror, vi skal være stille til spørgsmål.
Is there any question?
Questions?
I have a question. How are you going to understand whether your approach is successful, or in another way, what are your expected results? How do you see your students in the future?
On a long term or within
in the long term?
I can say, well, actually, I can say for this experiment was actually a part of I think an 8-year experiment. We had a specialization in innovation and creativity and entrepreneurship, and the long term. We just started out. It was a wild experiment working in this way, and then we, on the way, unfortunately, we didn't document systematically. We should have, but you can say that always about a lot of things. But on the long term experience, we saw that our students became, first of all, they worked longer hours than the other students that didn't work in that way. They became, they had a higher analytical, theoretical level, and they became more creative and innovative. And that to us was the indication, because it was a specialization in innovation and creativity and entrepreneurship. So they became more entrepreneurial and innovative, but at the same time they were able to look at their praxis analytically. So that was we didn't set out to be. We just started as a wild experiment, so we weren't that systematic about it. But I think that's the task we have in front of us, being more systematic in documenting the effects of this. Actually, I think that's a shared task in this. All of these people, us being present here in these days.
I think there is another challenge in your project. This is about the assessment. How this
Mm.
is assessed because it is connected with another course. If you talk about this being that you have to align the assessment.
Yeah.
But certainly I think we can say for our problem-oriented learning group work, project work and so on, I think that students are, at this point, they are, I think it's documented in other kinds of surveys and so on, that they are getting skills and competences that are not sort of caught or measured or valued in the exams, because they go for the learning learning outcomes and so on that we have from Bologna and so on. So I think there's an issue there also to get that kind of competences integrated into the assessment forms.
Yeah.
So I think that's
As this morning, the unexpected outcomes.
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
We can't actually always plan this when you work in this way.
No. Exactly.
Okay, I think we need to. Are you ready? Well, excellent. Then we shall move on.
Yeah.